All right, so plants, as we've said in this unit and in this course, are going to be our example of a multicellular organism that exhibits specialization. Okay, that is, it has different groups of tissues and cells that do certain jobs for the whole organism. Okay, they're specialized for that. Their structure is different. The types of organelles in them are different. Okay, all of that kind of stuff. All right, so we need to understand what factors influence the growth of plants. All right, so let's just kind of quickly brainstorm. What do we know about plants? What kind of things do plants need? Water. Okay, so water would certainly be one of those things. Okay, what else? Sunlight, or actually light of any kind, but they would prefer sunlight. Okay, what else? Soil, yeah. And what kind of things are in soil? Let's be even more specific than soil. Within the soil would be nutrients. Okay, what else would be in the soil? This stuff. That's where they get water from. Okay, but if we're being more specific than nutrients, okay, we could say things like nitrogen, okay, phosphorus, and potassium. Okay. Okay. If you ever, how many people have ever like fertilized lawn? Have seen a bag of fertilizer? And I don't mean like a bag of poop. I mean like an actual bag of commercial fertilizer. Okay, they always have 3 numbers on them. Those 3 numbers refer to these 3 nutrients. Okay, nitrogen is usually the highest number because it's the one they need to make protein. So when you actually fertilize a lawn, you are giving it the ability to make proteins more easily, which is why it greens up and grows faster. Okay, all of that kind of stuff. Phosphorus and potassium are other kind of macronutrients. They're things that the plant needs in order to carry out its daily business. Okay, so water, light, soil. Okay, what else? A couple other things. Well, one for sure. Plant needs it for photosynthesis. Yeah, CO2. Okay, a plant cannot survive without carbon dioxide. Okay, that is what it splits, okay, in the process of photosynthesis to get the carbon that would be in glucose. How many people have heard that if you talk to a plant, it grows better? Okay. If you haven't heard of that, it's actually true. Okay? It is true that if you talk to a plant, it will grow better. What is also true is you don't have to talk to it. You could just stand there and breathe on it, and that would do exactly the same thing. You're exhaling carbon dioxide. They want to take that carbon dioxide and make sugar with it. The more carbon dioxide they get in at least small amounts like that, the happier they are. Okay? I actually read one study where they tested that if how you talked to the plant affected its growth. So they had some people who said nice things, some people who screamed and yelled, some people who swore and cursed, and other things like, of course, had no effect. Okay? They all grew equally because all the plant cares about is, did it get carbon dioxide? It doesn't have feelings, so telling it it's an ugly, horrible plant doesn't affect its growth any. Okay? There's no psychology of plants. Okay? I think they were trying to prove something about like the chi or the energy or something like that went into the emotional resonance of plants, which was all garbage. It got carbon dioxide. It was just happy with that. Okay. Now, if you go home and start swearing and cursing at your plants, there could be some, effects for you, right? People will think you are crazy, and you probably are if you go home and swear at your plants. Okay. So don't do that. So those are the things that generally a plant would need. Now, a plant has to kind of grow in response to where it can find these resources. Okay, the most important 2 resources would be these 2. Okay, but light is the source of energy, so the plant has a lot more growth responses to light than it does to anything else. Its roots will naturally grow to the wettest parts of the soil. Okay, things like that. So it would definitely grow towards water, but light is the source of its ability to make sugar. So the plant will orient itself in response to the light in a whole bunch of different ways. Okay. All right, so that's the factors that can influence the growth of a plant. We're also going to look at plant hormones. Believe it or not, okay, plants also make hormones. Okay, hormones govern a lot of how our body functions. Okay, in terms of growth, in terms of just like homeostasis, that is keeping your body functioning at a proper level. You have all kinds of hormones that are constantly being produced to maintain blood sugar levels and metabolism and all of that. Okay, and we also have obviously hormones that regulate, reproductive processes and triggering puberty and things like that. Okay, all of those are certainly important. Plants have hormones that also regulate their growth. What's different is in the human body or the animal body, okay, there are specific tissues within the plant that produce them called, what do we call the things that make hormones? Starts with G. Hmm? Close. Oh no, genetics is your chromosomes and stuff. Glands. Okay, your glands are the things that make hormones. Okay, your adrenal glands. Okay, things like that. Pituitary gland. Right. So we have glands that produce those, specialized cells to produce those. In a plant, all of the cells can produce all of the hormones because the hormones could be needed by all of them. Okay, plants don't have glands. Okay, so they don't have specific sites of that production. Okay, and then lastly, we're going to look at that plant shape is not fixed. Okay, our final shape as an animal is fixed. Okay, we're going to have 2 eyes, 2 ears, 10 fingers, 10 toes, all of that. It's genetically predetermined. The final shape of a plant is not genetically predetermined. The type of leaves and pigmentation and stuff like that to an extent is, but the final shape is not. Okay, the final shape of a plant is the result of interaction between the environment and growth responses of a plant. Okay, to give you an example, these 2 plants over here, actually every single stalk in there is a separate plant, and they are all genetically identical. I know this because I bought this plant before you were born, back when I was in university, and it was one single stalk. Okay? When it gets too tall and falls over, I cut it off and stick it back in the ground, and it just continues to grow, and the piece I cut off will grow, and it just grows and grows and grows. Okay? So every piece in there is genetically identical, but they don't all have the same shape. Okay? The leaves are kind of the same shape, but I mean, you look at the stalks, some of them are really weird. Okay? Some of them are straight up and down, and some of them are bent all over the place. They're bent all over the place because I torment them. Okay, because I'm a science guy. Okay, I tie them to sticks. Okay, I set them down on things and make them grow back upwards. You can actually change the shape of a plant just by orienting it and turning it and things like that. Okay, prime example are these 2 plants over here. Oh yeah, it's absolutely an art. Okay, these 2 plants over here. These 2 plants I never turn. They always face the window. Notice there's no growth on the side that doesn't face the window. Okay? Why would the plant grow leaves over here if all those leaves are ever going to see is the shade? It would be a waste of energy. Okay? So these plants I always just leave this way and they only grow on one side. Okay? This plant over here that I forgot to water for a while and just watered this morning, okay, I turn periodically. Okay? And its growth, even though it looks really sick right now, okay, is a bit more even. I do need to turn it, okay, so that it faces the window again. Right? But I turn it quite a bit more often, and so its growth is a little more even on all sides. Okay, because every time it starts to get too much growth towards the window, I turn it again. Again, I torment my plants. Okay, once it grows a few leaves in the right direction, I turn it, make it grow the other way. Okay, and so it ends up even. That plant there and this plant are genetically identical. I just took snippings of that plant and planted it in that pot. Okay, so they are genetically identical, but they don't look the same. Okay, so their final shape is not genetically predetermined like ours is. It's the result of an interaction between the environment and its genetics. Okay, so plants have this problem. They can't move. Okay? They're rooted to one location for life. This isn't the Lord of the Rings. They're not Treebeard. They don't just pick up and go when things don't go well. Okay? They have to stay where they are, and they have to deal with the conditions in that place. Okay? So that means that instead of having a genetically predetermined shape, it's smarter to be able to alter your shape to best capture the resources available in your environment. Okay? An example here in this picture is this tree right here. And it's kind of hard to see, but this tree is actually shaped like this. Okay? Its trunk goes like that. Why would a tree grow that way? Well, it's a little bit to do with light, but I mean, if this tree just grew straight out like this, it would also get light, right? Like there's nothing around to shade it or anything, right? Sometimes plants will grow like that because of wind, not in this case, but there are examples of that where it happens. Close. It does have to do with something like that. It's very close to that. Okay. What happened to this tree is it got knocked over. It was a rock slide. Okay. It got knocked over, and so then it was growing like this. If it continued to grow out this way, it would get really heavy. Okay. As John pointed out, it would get heavy and it would fall over. So instead, it starts growing back over its roots in order to regain balance. Okay. Plants have a sense of gravity, which way is up and which way is down. They need this when they're small because it tells them which way to grow. Okay. It tells them that, okay, if I grow upwards against gravity, I'll eventually get into the light. Okay? Once they get mature, they don't really need that anymore unless they get knocked over. Because if they grow straight out, they'll pull out their own roots. So they want to get their weight back over their base, okay, in order to regain their balance. So they can grow in response to gravity. Okay? Other plants can grow, all plants can grow in response to light. Okay? We saw that with these plants here, the ones that I don't turn versus the ones I do turn. And when I was back in university and high school, I worked at a golf course, and we had this one spruce tree that was shaped like this. It grew out of the ground, and then it did this. No word of a lie, that's the shape of the trunk of this spruce tree. It had this big bow in it, okay? Grew sideways, up, and back over again, right? Beside this tree is a rose bush. So when the tree was small, the rose bush shaded it. So it grew out into the light. And as it started to get heavy, it grew back up again. A lot of tension on the plant would have told it get back over the roots again, and now it's shading out the rose bush that initially tried to kill it. Okay? This is competition between plants. They compete for light by trying to shade each other. Okay? And so this plant actually looks like this. Okay? As a result of growth in response to the location of its light source. All right, so the program for development of a plant is somewhat plastic. That is, plants of the same species or even plants that are genetically identical, made from cuttings or grown from cuttings of the same plant, okay, can look much more different as mature adults than animals of the same species. Okay, I mean, if you were to take a clone of yourself, it would look exactly like you. Okay, but that's not true for plants. Okay, we can grow kind of clones of plants by just taking cuttings and growing them somewhere else, and they don't necessarily end up looking exactly the same. All right, so a house plant on a windowsill, like I was showing you here before, will always grow towards its light source because that's its source of energy. Growing in any other direction is counterproductive. Okay, if I rotate the plant, it'll soon start growing the other way, okay, like the one over here does. So the growth of a shoot towards light is called phototropism. In this case, positive because it's actually growing towards the light. Okay, photo means light, and tropism is growth pattern. Okay, so there's actually 3 kinds of tropisms that we'll talk about in this class, but phototropism is probably the most important one. Okay, so in a forest or other natural ecosystem where plants are crowded, phototropism directs the plant to grow towards the sunlight that powers its photosynthesis, and the way it does this is controlled by the plant's hormones. Okay, because just like us, plant growth is dictated and governed by hormones. Okay, we have lots of different hormones, so do plants. Okay, so for that picture there on the right, where is the light source most likely located? Yep, okay, somewhere up here probably. Okay, the plants are growing towards that light. They've oriented the leaves so that they're facing the light, so they can capture the most light possible. Okay, and all plants will do that. Okay. All right, so we're going to look at 5 different types of plant hormones that govern the growth and development of a plant. Okay, now in this little petri dish here, we've got like little like alfalfa sprouts or bean sprouts that are growing. Okay, and we can see that most of them are growing over here towards the right. So the light source is most likely over here somewhere. Why is this one growing that way? Well, its leaves are still oriented that way. Exactly. The shortest route to get into the light for this one was actually to grow up. Okay, these ones here would shade it. There'd be kind of this cone of shade, okay, from those other ones. To grow up this way would get it into the light faster than having to grow over and around these ones. That's a lot more growth, that red line, than this plant is showing to get back to the light. Okay, so always taking kind of the path of least resistance. Being way at the back, okay, that's the quickest way for it to get into the light. All right, so each one of these plant hormones is going to be concerned with a certain type of growth and development within the plant. All right, so the first one that we're going to look at are called auxins. Okay? Auxins are a group of hormones, okay, that influence growth, okay? Specifically the lengthening of plant cells within the plant. As the cells get longer, the plant also gets longer or taller. All right, so the term auxin, okay, is used to describe any chemical substance that promotes the elongation, that is getting longer, okay, of the plant. Okay, auxins have a few other uses as well, okay, or a few other functions, sorry, within the plant, but for the most part, okay, their job is to influence the lengthening of the plant. So this picture here and this picture here are of the same place, a few weeks apart. Okay, on the left we see, quite thick jungle around the river, and on the right, the jungle is gone. All right, in a matter of weeks. So, what could have possibly happened here? What could make a jungle disappear in a matter of weeks? Okay, if it could, I mean, deforestation is possible, but even to actually deforest an area of jungle that thick would probably take more than a few weeks, and we would see, still evidence of like roads and stuff like that for it to happen, which we don't see here. Okay, it could be sort of, but it's not quite the right color, and in the tropical rainforest, fires aren't very common. Okay, so I'll give you a couple more hints. These two pictures are taken in Southeast Asia around 1969, 1970. No. Pollution is a little closer. Getting closer.
The smoke, maybe smoke. You said it was like that, so maybe like a bunch of smoke came over and didn't get it.
No. Yes. Okay. This is taken in Vietnam. Okay. During the Vietnam War did not go well, okay, for the Americans. Okay. They were constantly ambushed in the jungle, right? Because the North Vietnamese soldiers who, grew up there, they knew the jungle like the back of their hand, and they had an intricate system of tunnels and things like that. They could come out of nowhere and ambush the Americans and kill them, and obviously that's not good. Okay, so the American army went to the CIA and said, look, we're getting slaughtered here. We got no way to figure out where all these people are. They can hide everywhere because the jungle is thick and it's hard to see through, and so they have all these hiding places, and we're kind of tired of it. Can you do something about the jungle? And CIA says, okay, we'll come up with something. So after a lot of testing and mixing of chemicals and things like that, they developed something called Agent Orange. That's what the CIA called this stuff, Agent Orange. It was a chemical defoliant, which means it kills plants. You spray it on anything, and anything green essentially, and it dies. Right? Agent Orange was a synthetic auxin. So they would spray it on the trees, and the trees would literally grow themselves to death. Okay? Because this auxin is telling them to grow, 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 but they didn't have the resources and nutrients to support the growth, so they would just grow until they died, keeled over and died. Okay? And then the jungle turned orange, hence Agent Orange. Okay? So the CIA, because the type of people that would come up with something like this kind of have a sick sense of humor. Okay, they put these things on helicopters, big tanks and spraying apparatus and whatever, and then they painted on the helicopters a picture of Smokey the Bear, and it said, "Only you can prevent forest."
Put the Lorax.
Well, he was trying to save the forest.
Yeah, but he's orange, and that way, like, agent, double agent.
I don't know. But only you can prevent forest instead of only you can prevent forest fires, right? So yeah, a little warped. But anyway, this stuff worked, and it would kill huge swaths of the jungle. The problem was it also had all kinds of other nasty effects because it was the harsh chemical. And they just sprayed it on everything and everybody. They sprayed it on the people who lived there. They sprayed it on their own soldiers and whatever. And a lot of people and animals and whatever developed cancer as a result of being exposed to this stuff, okay, in the high volumes they were using it. Okay, because really, if you have rapid cell growth, you have cancer. Okay, and while this wasn't multiplication of cells initially, it was an overgrowth of cells. Okay? So it mostly affected people and animals in their lung tissue because they would inhale it. Right? But for the plants, it would be absorbed through the stomates, and then it would act. You would essentially enact its chemical process, okay, which is growth, and the plants would just grow themselves to death. Okay, we use a similar chemical to this now to kill dandelions. Anyone ever seen what happens to dandelions when they get sprayed in the summertime? They grow all long and coily, and then they die. Okay, it's the same thing. Okay, Killex, which is 2,4-D, okay, is essentially watered down Agent Orange. Okay? It kills weeds, but not grass. Grass has different shaped leaves. They're long blades as opposed to broad leaves. This stuff kills only broad-leafed weeds. So it kills all the undesirable stuff and leaves your grass alone. Okay? So it's got some good uses. Okay? But as an auxin, okay, it's just essentially a synthetic hormone. And there can be too much of a good thing. Right? If you overdose something on even a natural substance, that can be bad. Okay? Same thing is true if people take steroids. Okay, you guys have all seen what the roid monkeys look like. That's maybe not a politically correct term, but okay, yeah, some of them look freakish. Okay, well, is that good for them? No. Okay, there are lots of really negative side effects, even though they're taking a natural substance. Okay, this is a hormone that occurs naturally in the human body, but they're putting it in their body in massive amounts, way more than their body was ever designed to have. Okay, so yes, it carries out the primary function, which is build muscle mass. Okay, so if you're taking, let's say, like testosterone, okay, you develop then all the characteristics that testosterone is supposed to make. Okay, that's a secondary male sexual characteristics, large muscles, okay, hair, stuff like that. Okay, that all comes as a result of taking testosterone. Okay, but if you take too much of it, the body has to get rid of the byproducts, which can be toxic. So it's hard on the liver, it's hard on the kidneys. Okay, and if your body detects that this stuff is always present, it's always sending a signal to the glands that produce it to stop producing it. Okay, and the glands that are producing it are going, yeah, we stopped a long time ago. We heard you the first time. We haven't been producing it for months and months. And what happens if you stop using something? Yep. Shrinks. Think about it. Yeah. Think about the things that produce testosterone. Okay, they're going to shrink. Okay, I'm not kidding you. That's what will happen. It's a natural fact. Okay, they will shrink and possibly be less useful than they were before. Bad side effect. Okay, don't use steroids. That'll happen. Okay, so yeah, you want to avoid that. Okay, but that's what'll happen is you get too much of something, even if it's a natural thing, it's going to end up having kind of negative effects. Similarly, if you put the wrong types of hormones into something, that could have negative effects too. Back in the mid to late 80s, okay, lots of sprinters were using like testosterone, even female sprinters. And So they took these male hormones and as a result started developing male secondary, not primary sexual characteristics. Okay, so they developed very large musculature, deepened voices, increased hair growth, okay, stuff like that. They looked quite mannish, okay, as a result. Okay, and a lot of them died early, unfortunately, from different forms of cancer as a result of taking those steroids. Okay, if you look at like the 1980 Olympics, the pictures of the people in the 1980 Olympics, okay, like especially like the East German women's swim team, yeah, there was a lot of steroid use, okay, back then, and yeah, they didn't understand necessarily all the side effects of it. So things to think about. Steroids are bad. Okay. All right, other use of auxin. How many people like seedless fruit? Right? And it's a pain in the neck to have to deal with seeds all the time, right? Seedless fruit's wonderful. There's no seeds in it. The way that seeds get produced in a plant, okay, so the fruit comes from the flower. Okay, so anything that you eat that came from a flower is technically a fruit. That's peas, beans, tomatoes, okay, all these things that we typically group into vegetables, they're actually fruit, okay, because they come from the blossom. So the pollen lands on the flower, okay, and the flower actually has male and female parts in it. The pollen contains sperm, plant sperm. Okay, it lands on the female part of the plant, and then there's a little chemical reaction that happens that allows the sperm from the pollen grain to go down and fertilize the egg, which is at the base of the flower. That's where the ovary is, right? So that we call them all the same things, even in plants and animals. Okay, so that's where the egg is. When the egg is fertilized, the ovary swells and becomes full of sugary tissue, the fruit, and inside the fruit is the seed. Okay, the seed is actually the embryo of the plant. It is the fertilized egg of the plant. All right, so if you want to produce seedless fruit, you have to trick the flower into thinking that pollen has landed on it so that it'll start developing the fruit with no fertilized egg inside. Okay, auxins can do that if they're applied in very, very light concentrations to the flowers. Okay, too much, you kill the plant. Too little doesn't have any effect. So there's this delicate balance. Very, very small amount, okay, will fool the blossom into thinking it's been fertilized, and it'll grow a fruit without any seeds in it. Okay. But you won't find seedless fruit in the organic fruits market because they have to spray it with this stuff, okay, which is definitely not an organic way to grow anything. Okay. All right, so another couple of other examples here. Okay, if we're looking at a normal plant, that's what wild type means. Okay, a normal, like this is I think chickweed or something like that. Okay, it gets one kind of large stalk, a bunch of leaves near the base, and a fairly developed root system. When we spray it with auxins, okay, we find it grows a whole bunch of extra, okay, kind of like shoot tissue and almost no roots. Okay, so it overgrows its ability to acquire nutrients from the ground and just grows itself to death. Okay, just like we see with the dandelions. All right, so auxins. Quick review here. Auxins make the plant get longer, okay, by making individual cells grow longer. Okay, it doesn't make more cells, just makes the cells get longer. Okay, the other kind of growth is going to be making more cells. If we're going to grow more tissue, we have to have more cells. We can't just make the cells bigger. We know what happens when a cell gets too big. So we need to have the ability to make more cells. And there's a hormone that governs cell reproduction within the plant. And that hormone is called cytokinins, okay? Because they cause cytokinesis, which is a technical name for cell division. Okay, so cytokinins cause cells to reproduce, to divide. And this is why plants can often live for a very, very long time. They have the ability, some plants anyway, have the ability to replace old, malfunctioning, dying cells, okay, just by simply producing more. Right? If we have, if we need to replace cells, sure, our cells can divide, but there's kind of an extent to which Well, if they keep dividing, they start making mistakes, and then you develop tumors and things like that. Okay, so we don't really have a hormone that governs this, but plants do. Okay, and so as a result, they can replace tissues that are dying or old, and that allows them to live a very long time. Right, so cytokinins basically cause cell division, okay, and allows them to replace old, diseased, or damaged cells. Okay, if you over apply this stuff to a plant, okay, it goes from making kind of normal looking leaves to having leaves that have basically no shape. It's just tissue everywhere. Okay, so the cells just divide, and it gets kind of a random or kind of a fractal kind of shape to it. Okay, but it just grows tissue everywhere. Looks like what? Yeah, a little bit. Yeah, except that it's supposed to have these kind of square looking leaves instead. Okay, same with the picture there on the right. Okay, this would be a normal plant, okay, with small amount of cytokinins, whereas here, okay, it's constantly being able to replace the older cells. Okay, it just grows new leaves. Okay, so the leaves don't die. All right, then we got gibberellins. Gibberellins are kind of like auxins in that they do influence growth in both the leaves and the stem, but they don't affect the roots quite as much. Okay, in stems, gibberellins stimulate both elongation and cell division. But gibberellins are more about secondary growth as opposed to primary growth. So primary growth means cells get longer, plant gets taller. Okay, but if a plant only grows upwards, it'll eventually get too heavy and break and fall over. So it has to also increase its girth. Okay, that is, get wider. So like a tall tree doesn't just get taller, it also gets wider at the base to help support all the weight. Gibberellins really affect that kind of secondary growth. Okay, so these two, or this picture here is showing two different varieties of rice. Okay, this is normal healthy rice here on the left, and the rice on the right has what is called foolish seedling disease. Okay? Foolish seedling disease is caused by a fungus that grows on the roots. Okay? And it causes the plant to produce less gibberellins. So the plant grows upwards, but gains no secondary growth. So it gets tall and skinny, falls over and dies. Foolish seedlings. Okay? So the young rice plants end up dying because they just grow up, they don't support themselves, they fall over and die. Okay, so gibberellins are pretty important. Okay, and extra gibberellins can actually result in the dwarf shape of a plant, which means they get really girthy but not really tall. Okay, and that's not like being politically incorrect. That is a term used to describe a shortened version of a plant. Okay, we're not like using a politically incorrect term for little people. Okay, this is a genetic term. Okay. All right, other things is gibberellins can also affect the size and amount of fruit that can be grown, okay, on the plant. So if we're looking at a normal plant that has just normal amounts of gibberellins, we get more blossoms, okay, but smaller fruit. Okay, on a plant that has more gibberellins, we get fewer blossoms, but we get bigger fruit from those fewer blossoms. Okay, so if you've ever, if you went to the grocery store and you bought those, strawberries that kind of from a distance look like they might be apples because they're so big. Okay, that's generally a side effect of having a bit of added gibberellin. Less blossoms means we don't have to split the nutrients between as much fruit, so the fruit gets bigger. Okay, so if you ever buy giant fruit, that's probably how they got it that way. Okay, questions on that? Okay, so gibberellins, again, have to do with secondary growth, okay, increasing girth in the plant. All right, abscisic acid, okay, this is a chemical produced by plants that helps them to regulate growth and deal with seasonality. Okay, obviously in the fall, our plants here go dormant. Okay, what makes them go dormant? What specifically about it? Actually has nothing to do with temperature, because temperature is unreliable as a cue for when a season is starting or ending. Case in point, it's middle of April and there's still 2 feet of snow and it's still freaking cold out there. Okay, but what is consistent every year? Sunlight. Okay, the days are still predictably getting longer. Okay? That's the best signal for a plant to know that winter is coming. The days are getting shorter. The amount of photosynthesis it can carry out is decreased because the amount of hours of sunshine is going down. Everyone kind of follow me there? So as a plant that needs to go dormant notices its amount of photosynthesis has decreased, it'll start secreting abscisic acid. Okay? And abscisic acid allows the plant to assume a more dormant state. Okay? And it does that, and you'll probably want to write this down, by interrupting, interrupt has two R's, interrupting the production of chlorophyll. Okay? Abscisic acid, as its name would imply, is acidic. And the presence of it actually causes chlorophyll to not form properly. Okay? So if the plant is not able to produce chlorophyll, then it doesn't carry out as much photosynthesis and its leaves change color. Since it's not carrying out photosynthesis, it also stops transporting water. Okay? That's also a good thing. A plant does not want to have loads of water in its branches when it gets cold and freezes. Because what does water do when it freezes? It expands and it'll break the plant open. Okay? So having this interruption of chlorophyll production causes the plant to stop transporting water, which essentially prepares it for a freeze. Okay? Abscisic acid can also be produced by plants that are going to be facing a drought. Okay, so some plants in like desert areas will produce abscisic acid when their photosynthesis levels are getting really, really high. Okay, it all depends on where the plant grows. All right, so abscisic acid causes dormancy by interrupting the production of chlorophyll. All right, then we got ethylene gas. Okay, not a true hormone, but has hormone effects on a plant. Okay, ethylene is produced by different parts of the plant. Okay, lots of times by the base of the flower and sometimes by the fruit itself. Okay, it causes the ripening of fruit. Okay, and what fruit ripens fastest? Bananas. Yeah, bananas produce more ethylene than any other fruit, okay? Which is why you don't want to put bananas next to anything else. Okay? They will cause it to spoil rapidly because of the amount of ethylene gas that they produce. Okay? This is why there is a banana principle. You guys heard of the banana principle before? Okay. The banana principle is Murphy's Law applied to bananas. If you buy bananas when they're green, you'll eat them before they're yellow. If you buy them when they're yellow, they'll be brown before you eat them. You know it's true. It happens every time. Okay? If you buy them and they're a little green, you eat them right away. Okay? And if you buy them when they're yellow, you forget about them and they're brown when you want to eat them. It happens every time. Okay? It's because they produce lots and lots of ethylene. So you want to keep them away from other fruit, okay? Which is usually why we put them on the counter and put everything else in the fridge. Okay? Now, other forms of fruit that do that, obviously all forms of fruit do this. Okay, apples produce a fair amount of ethylene gas as well. Okay, and it can affect even vegetables and things like that. Okay, that might not have fruit, but they spoil quickly in response to the presence of ethylene gas. Okay, one trick that we use ethylene for is, especially around here, in the fall, maybe our tomatoes, if we've been growing tomatoes, aren't quite ready yet. They're not red, but they're on the vine, but it's going to freeze. I mean, we know tomatoes don't do well after a freeze, so we harvest them all, we bring them in, and we just kind of keep them in a box. Okay, but they take quite a while to ripen if it's just the tomatoes. You want them to ripen faster? Throw a couple of apples in the box with the tomatoes and put the lid on. Okay, they'll ripen like 2 or 3 times faster because the ethylene gas from the apple will be trapped in there. Okay, with the tomatoes. You throw a banana in there, they'll go rotten really fast. Okay, but an apple releases it a little more regularly. Okay, so ethylene gas will cause the ripening of fruit. It also signals a plant that is an annual, okay, that is only grows for 1 season, that it's time to die. Okay, once the fruit is produced, the seed has been produced, the offspring are there. Okay, so the plant has done what it needs to do, and now it's time for it to just kind of go quietly. Okay, so this ethylene gas can also start that process along. Okay, so those are the 5 hormones, okay, that we're going to talk about. Auxins, cytokinins, gibberellins, abscisic acid, and ethylene. All right, I'm going to give you a 5-minute break here. I've been talking for quite a while. Give you a 5-minute break, and then I'm going to go over the rest of it here. All right, so now we've talked about the hormones that a plant can secrete, okay, and kind of the effects that they have on the growth of a plant. Now we're going to look at how those can be used by the plant to alter its shape. Because at the beginning of the day, we said that the plant's final shape is not genetically predetermined. Okay? It is the result of an interaction between the environment and the plant itself. Okay? So the hormones are what the plant can use to help itself change its shape. Okay? Anything that results in any growth that results in the change of shape of an organism, of a plant, is a tropism. Okay? So tropisms mean the change in shape of the plant itself. Right? The way that a plant can change shape is that it's going to have a differential rate of growth of cells on opposite sides of the plant organ, usually the stem. Okay, so in order for this plant to assume this shape, okay, that we see in the picture here, the cells on this side grow faster than the cells on the inside. Okay, that is, they get longer more quickly than the ones on the inside. Okay, so they essentially push the plant in that direction. Now, what hormone causes cells generally to get longer? Auxins. Okay, so auxins are our primary hormone for making tropisms happen. Okay, because they're the ones that cause cells to get longer. So what a plant does if it needs to change shape is the cells on one side produce more auxins than the cells on the other. And so as a result, the cells on this side will get longer than the cells on this side, and that will push the plant to turn or bend in that direction. All right, there's 3 stimuli, that's 3 things that cause tropisms to happen, that cause auxins to be produced on one side more than on the other. Okay, geotropism is the first tropism we're going to talk about. Geo means by gravity, or the earth causes it. Okay, so the earth's gravity, okay, signals a plant to tell it whether it's standing straight up and down or whether it's leaning to one side. Okay, if it's leaning to one side, then what it'll try and do is make cells on that lower side grow faster to try and straighten it back up and rebalance it. All right, so we can see that a little bit in this tree right here. Okay, it's starting to grow back up over its base. Okay, so the cells on this side are growing faster than the cells on the inside. Okay, and we know that this one is caused mostly by gravity, because if the plant were to grow out like this in this situation, there's nothing really that would shade it. Okay, it would still get just as much light if it grew that way. Okay, but this way allows it to rebalance itself. Right, so it's not growing in response to light; it's growing in response to gravity. Okay, so geotropism is caused by gravity. So that was that same picture we looked at a minute ago. Okay, that's also an example of geotropism. Okay, in a few studies on the International Space Station, they have found that in the absence of gravity, plants grow really wild. Okay, they grow completely in response to the location of light, but they just kind of grow everywhere. Okay, because gravity is no longer dictating which way is up and down. Okay, so they grow really, really funky. Okay. Okay, phototropism we talked about already. Phototropism is growth of a plant towards light, and this is the most important tropism because it's the one that feeds the plant. Okay, so this one overtakes all other tropisms. Okay, a plant would rather grow towards light than in result of gravity. Okay, so if it had to choose, a plant would grow towards the light and fall over rather than grow straight up and down and starve. Okay, so towards the light is the primary tropism. Okay, but the mechanism by which it happens is still the same. The cells on this side have to grow faster or longer than the cells on the inside, and that's what pushes or causes a torquing of the plant to bend in that direction. Questions on that one? Okay, now the last one is touch. Okay, plants can grow in response to touch. Okay? Some plants rely on this in order to grow, and other plants just kind of have a minor response to it. Okay, but if you've ever seen ivy growing up the side of like a brick or stone building, okay, it's that plant that just kind of crawls up the walls. Honeysuckle does this as well. Okay, things like that. Okay, they grow up in response to touch. When they detect the presence of this solid object, they grab onto it. Okay, peas and sweet peas will do the same thing. In fact, if you want peas to grow effectively in your garden, you have to put a fence beside them. Okay, a special like chicken wire kind of pea fence, and they'll grow up the fence. Otherwise, they grow on the ground, and the peas get dirty and they mold, and then they're not as good. Okay, they want to grow upwards, so they put these little tendrils out that just wrap around the whatever else they're on, like a fence or whatever. Okay, and they'll grab onto it. Some plants, it's a chemical process. Ivy uses a chemical process to hold on to walls. So the ends of the stems, when they contact brick and cement and stuff like that, secrete an acid, okay, that'll erode the material enough for the plant to get like a tendril into the hole where it can hold on. Okay, these plants here do exactly the same thing. Okay, at every place where there's a branching, you see these little kind of brown structures here? Okay, if they touch drywall, they secrete an acid that will essentially dissolve the drywall. And then they'll put little tendrils into the drywall to hold on. Okay, that's why they are away from the wall. I learned this the hard way with this plant. See how long it is? It used to be a lot longer than that because it used to be growing on top of my cupboards. And I just left it up there. It was fine. And then I got married, and my wife and I bought a different house and moved into that house. And I went to pull this thing off the top of the cupboards when we were moving, and I pulled out a chunk of drywall about this big. Okay, because this plant had grown these tendrils in behind. It looked like blood vessels, like veins in behind the drywall, and it had grown so much in there and kind of rotted the drywall. I didn't notice it because it was way up high where I couldn't see it. I just stepped off of a chair, okay, pulling this plant down, and pulled out this chunk of drywall like this, okay, because the stuff had grown in behind it. Okay, just eroded little holes, and the tendrils went through the holes. Okay, nasty. And then I had a big hole in my wall to repair before the next person took possession of the house. So some plants can do that, but it's a thigmotropism thing. It's a response to touch. Plants can detect the presence of objects near them, and they can hold on to them. Okay. All right, so this picture here is also showing an example of that. Plants will use that as an aid to get taller. Okay, they can concentrate all their growth vertically and don't have to use as much of the gibberellins to make girth because they don't have to support themselves. Okay, they can use whatever's next to them to hold on to, okay, and they can get taller faster. Okay, that's what happened with this one. This had a stick in it. Okay, someone's just holding it off camera over here. Okay, but it had a stick in it that it wound around and supported itself on the stick. So it was able to grow faster than the one that didn't have a stick on the left. All right, so thigmotropism, response to touch. Okay, but again, to make those tendrils still means that one side of the plant has to grow longer cells than the other side in order to cause that coiling, okay, or turning or bending effect. Okay, so how would I test this on a test? I would give you a picture of a plant and describe the situation the plant is in, and you would have to tell me whether you think it's phototropism, geotropism, thigmotropism, explain how it happens and why it's happening in that situation. So talk about auxins, talk about how it makes cells on one side grow longer, okay, that causes the plant to bend, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, so you talk all about that kind of stuff. All right, I'm going to give you a little bit of time to answer those questions. Okay, some of them are just fill in the blank, so you just fill in the blank, but other ones could result in, a few sentences being written. So I'm going to give you a little bit of time to work on those, and then we'll go over them together. Okay, let's look at these questions here. So for number 1, why is it that two identical plants, okay, that genetically identical, grown from clippings of the same plant, can grow up to look entirely different?
Because they don't have predetermined shape, so it's all based on the way they grow. So it's all based on the environments they're in.
Right, it's based on the environment you put them in. If I put genetically identical plants in exactly the same environment, they're probably going to look pretty much the same. Not exactly, but pretty much. Okay, but if I put them in very different environments, they may grow up to look very, very different. Okay, their final shape is not genetically predetermined. It's the interaction between the plant and the factors it requires to grow. All right, for number 2, we call any growth pattern in plants a what? Tropism. Okay, simple as that. Simple word. Tropism means a growth pattern or change in shape of a plant. Okay, plants in the tropical rainforest, do they require very much abscisic acid? So what does abscisic acid do? See? Right, it stops the plant from carrying out photosynthesis by stopping it from making chlorophyll, which essentially makes the plant go dormant. Do tropical rainforest plants need to go dormant? No, that would be bad. If you're a tropical rainforest plant and you go dormant, you're going to die because everything else is going to overgrow you. Okay, and tropical rainforest plants grow all year. Okay, number 4, long exposure to 2,4-D, which is a synthetic auxin, has been shown to produce cancerous tumors in humans. Why might this happen? After all, it's a plant hormone. Is it still a chemical messenger? Yeah, if we absorb it, it's going to signal our cells to do things, not the right things, unfortunately. Okay, and that's what can cause them to start to grow out of control and produce cancerous tumors. Okay. All right, and number 5, this hormone's involved in the ripening of fruit, ethylene. All right, so tomorrow is Tuesday. You will have a short quiz on the first couple of lessons to do with plants. Okay, so a little bit from the multicellularity lesson on structure of plants, okay, and a little bit from the transport of water in plants lesson, okay, that was on Thursday before the Easter break. So just go over those. The questions are, you'll find the answers in those lessons really quickly when you look at the quiz. Shouldn't take you more than 5 or 10 minutes. Okay, so have a look over that tonight so you can get 100% tomorrow. Also remember, Wednesday is when your cell anatomy labs are due, so make sure you have them finished for that time.